Welcome to Building SaaS with Python and Django. My name is Matt Lehman, and I'm the streamer. And on this stream, we do Python development, Django web application development specifically. And I walk you through the process that I'm using for a side project, let people see the code that I'm working on, and we learn together on the way, because I don't always know everything that I'm doing. But I've been doing Django for probably 5 years professionally now, so I do know how the framework works. And the idea is to show you what I know and do it in a tangible way on a real project, so you can get an idea of how this works. Today we're going to continue on the path that I tried to do last stream, which was to build an authentication system using django-allauth. Got a new microphone and I'm not quite adjusted yet. That thing just fell right off the stand. Let's try that again. So, sorry, what I was saying is that I'm using django-allauth, which is a authentication package, user package for doing, allowing you to create user accounts in a variety of ways. And we're going to do it to create a user flow where you sign up for the site that I'm building using an email address and a password, rather than Django's standard mode, which is to use a username and password combination. So that is a useful mechanism, but I just wanted to go with something slightly different for my app. So I'm going to use django-allauth, which makes that process pretty easy. So I've got the project itself is about homeschool scheduling, and it's because my children are starting homeschool, and my wife would like an app to do that, and I thought I would make something for her in that regard. And so she's kind of the one driving out what does she want, and it's my job to fill in the gaps. So with the actual code to make this happen. But I don't think we're going to be spending a lot of time on that particular domain tonight. We're going to be looking mostly at user accounts. So we're going to follow along with a post that Will Vincent has written up about using django-allauth, and it's targeted exactly to be the thing that we want. So I will note that we do have a chat here. You're welcome to use it. I dropped some notes in here for myself that I can use to write up show notes later. But if you do use the chat, please go ahead. We'll gladly take questions. I do ask that people be civil, though. And before I continue, I will note that if you want to keep up with me in other ways, I have a website listed above at mattlehman.com. There's an email address or a mailing list that you can sign up with there. You can find out information about Django that I write. I write pretty regularly on that website, and you can keep in touch with me that way. I also have a social media presence on Twitter as MBLehman, and I have YouTube accounts as well. So after this video is recorded, I post stuff to YouTube. So if in case you miss anything, it is up there. You can search for Matt Lehman on YouTube, and I should be pretty close to the top of those results. Finally, I do have a Patreon as well. So if you've been following along and you've been getting a bunch of value out of this, and you want to be able to support me financially, I would really appreciate that. I do try and take the funds that I collect from this. I have a few patrons. Thank you to Mark and Patrick and Dylan for your contributions. I do plan to take those funds and pour them back into the Django community. I'm planning to release a podcast here probably at the end of the month, and podcasts cost money to host. So your patronage definitely would help support in that way. So I've listed this link to Will Vincent's post about using allauth. We're going to follow it. I did, and I guess I will preface that I did some of this work already. I did it in the last stream. I showed people how to use a custom user model. And so we're going to be able to skip some pieces of this, but I am going to follow what we haven't done yet. The end goal of this is I want to be able to go ahead and deploy this. I'm deploying to Heroku, is where my app is living, and get it all the way out there with some very basic templates. I don't want to do anything fancy yet. It's just really to prove out, can I create new users with email addresses rather than usernames? So let's dig into this here and go through and see where I left off, and then we'll get into some code. So We don't need to follow the get started steps because we already have a project to use. We also don't need to follow this custom user model because that's what I did on the last stream. So if you want to see what I did and what Will did, you can, of course, read Will's article, but you can also go see what I did. Will has some stuff in here about creating custom forms, and I'm honestly not sure if I need to use that. I don't know if django-allauth hooks into that or if it's mostly for the admin. I want to say it's for the admin because it immediately following this form creation stuff that's here, he hooks it up into the admin that's there. So while I could do that admin work, I don't think it's critical to what I need to do because I don't anticipate creating users through the admin. Maybe experience will prove me wrong and I'll come back to this post and do what Will did, but I don't think I'm going to do that. And I've also done the work to make the migrations for the user model, the custom user model. I've migrated stuff. I've even gone so far to create a super user, I believe, and I've tested it out. So the steps that Will has listed here are steps that we don't need to follow. Let's proceed. This is where he introduces django-allauth, and I honestly don't even remember if I installed django-allauth or not, so let's check it out. I'm going to start by looking in my requirements.include file, and no, we didn't even get that far. So if you watched my last stream, at the very tail end, I was abruptly cut off, and because I had to upgrade to my operating system and OBS, the broadcasting software that I use to do streaming, was not playing nicely with my version of Mac OS at the time. But that is hopefully resolved now. I upgraded some stuff in the interim, and I think we're back to a stable place. So hopefully there won't be any crashes. It was a really weird crash too. It was like I would start up the Django web server, and when I would log in to the admin and do that actual post request, it would crash the OBS software, which is super weird. But that should be behind us if things work according to plan. So we need to start by putting django-allauth in here. So Will is showing an example of using pipenv. I'm not using pipenv for my tool, so what I'm going to do is go to PyPI and search for django-allauth and find the version because I want to pin to a specific version. The notion of pinning your packages is pretty solid, and what pinning means is that you pick a specific version number, and the reason you want to do that is you want your environment that you deploy to, in my case Heroku, to match as closely as possible to the environment you develop with. And so if I just said install django-allauth, it's possible that in my local environment, if I don't keep things up to date and don't upgrade packages, I could be stuck with this 0.41.0 version, which is fine, but as time goes on and new versions of this come out and I continue to do deploys, it's possible that what I would be deploying to my my server on Heroku could start to diverge from what I have locally in development. And so the rule of thumb is to just pin everything to exact versions so that you have full knowledge of everything that is in your system. And so we're going to put in django-allauth as this right here in this requirements.include file. And I'm going to use the latest version that's available, 0.41.0. And that is step one. So the next step in this process is to update the requirements.txt file, because what I'm really doing is a two-stage process here. I'm using a tool called piptools to generate the full list of packages. And that's a little weird. You might wonder why. If you look at this file, this might not be the whole story of all the packages that get installed. And I know for a fact that it's not. For example, Django Heroku installs the package that lets you interface with the Postgres database. And so that is one of the, it's called a transitive dependency. It's a dependency of a dependency. And if you don't And if you just install it this way, then you're kind of at the whim of whatever might happen when you do your installation. So by using this pip tools thing, and we can look at the requirements file and compare them. Let's do that. Requirements txt. You can see that there's this generated file, and it shows us what packages were installed as extra stuff from our dependencies, so that when we get the full system in place, we have detailed every package that we need for our process. So, and this tool even tells you where it came from. So Django, this is that Postgres package, psychopg2, and it's coming from Django Heroku. So just to give you an idea of what's going on there. So we're going to follow along with this command, this pip compile command, to basically put our django-allauth stuff into the requirements txt file. I'm going to let that run for a second. Okay, we can see that django-allauth does have dependencies of its own. It's got the Python 3 OpenID package here. It's got request OAuth lib. It's got requests. So those were definitely good to run pip tools and pip compile so that we get that full list. And now you can see all the stuff that got changed because of that one introduction. So it's grown the package list by quite a bit, but it's what we need. So we're going to go with it. So the next step is to say pip install the requirements txt file. And you have to use the -r flag to say read from a requirements file. If you don't, you're basically telling pip to look on PyPI for a package called requirements.txt. Thankfully, someone has thought about that, and it gives you a nice error message when you install that saying, hey, this is not what you wanted. But that's just an extra little tidbit of knowledge for you. So now we have django-allauth installed and available, but it's not ready to use yet. When you work with Django projects, especially Django extension packages like this, they often put them in Django apps. So I do this basically every time now, but the project structure for Django is there's a project at the top, and apps are the pieces, the components that go underneath it. And this is useful when it comes to the external third-party stuff, because the third-party ecosystem and the extensions that are available to Django can also be apps. So when you want to enable new functionality, you actually have to explicitly opt in to that functionality by putting it in this list of installed applications. And I think, let's go back to Will's article, but I'm pretty sure that would be my guess of what it says to do next. So he's got the contrib sites, and I think a lot of what he's done here is following the installation instructions of django-allauth itself. So if I went through and read some of the documentations for the actual project and saw some of the same stuff. So what he's doing is showing you what they would show you in the docs, but we're kind of following this whole guide, so I'll follow suit. And so what we need is to come into my settings file, which is right here. And in the installed apps area, I'm going to group this as all of the Django core stuff is going to go here, and then my local stuff is here. I've got 2 apps so far, and any third-party stuff will go here in between. So the first thing it said we needed is Django contrib sites. And we'll do it like that. And then we need the actual Allauth packages, which were Allauth and Allauth account and Allauth social account. Now, I'm not truly convinced that I need Allauth social account, because Allauth does a couple of things for you. It kind of gives you these advanced tools for working with the scheme that we're going to do, like an email login and changing that kind of stuff. But it also gives you the ability to create login flows using external providers like Google login, Facebook login. Any of those kind of external services that you want to use are bundled into this one package, so that if you provide the right keys in your settings area, then Allauth will basically take over and do the work for you, so that you can just put a button on your site that will do the thing that you need. I'm not going to do that, but I'm just going to follow suit with social account here. It's a little bit of, the term is sometimes called cargo cult programming, where you're just following with what's there, even though it may not be right. But I'm okay with that in that circumstance. I'd rather just have the assurance that I'm configuring it in a way that I know that Will has tested this stuff, even if it means I'm being slightly, including slightly too much. And so we get social account and account. So I think the thing that we really need is account, but we're pulling social account along for the ride. And we already have our users app here as homeschool users. Okay. So here's where I really appreciate Will's post. There are a lot of configuration options, as he mentions, and we could spend our time reading each one. And I might offline. I don't know if there's any goodness in here that would be beneficial long term. But there's a bunch of these options. And since his post is all about creating a login scheme that uses email, he's already found the right set of settings in order to make this happen. This one is particularly curious about doing a console backend. Long term, I think that's going to want to change if I'm actually sending email. But for the purpose of getting this up to date, I'm willing to follow it. So I should preface, or not preface, but I should comment on the fact that my last project I shut down a while ago. You can go read my postmortem about it on my website. I did too much. I was all in. I basically gold-plated everything. I did a lot of different extensions and services and just got carried away with that. And it was fun and it was educational to viewers like yourself, but it wasn't actually helpful for me to get the project off the ground and get some real users. So this time around, I'm very much focused on do the minimum thing that I can to get myself to a place where the website is actually adding value. And for me, that means until my wife, as my first customer, is able to use the site and can report back feedback and say whether she's happy or not, then everything else is just frill. It doesn't matter. So to that end, I'm going to follow this email backend, even though I know that we could probably change it to be more robust email handling, and then we will upgrade things later as necessary. So he's got email backend, and where am I going to put this stuff? Let's think on that for a second. So let's see, is email in here anywhere? It's not even defined yet, so the default must be like empty or something like that. And I know that email backend is a Django setting. In fact, these first three of email backend, authentication backends, and site ID are all coming from Django settings. It's this last one grouping here that are actual to Allauth. And so that's where we will differentiate the two. So I think for this purpose of settings, I probably want to keep all of my Django specific settings grouped together, and then I will put all of my third-party settings like Allauth at the bottom. So we can start with the email backend, and I'll just copy that whole thing. And where should we put it? We don't really have an email section yet. This stuff's related to templates. That's okay. Maybe I'll start going alphabetically here. There's got a database section. So let's create an email section. Just put an email comment there and set the email backend. All right. Next, we have our authentication backends. So let's take all of this stuff and authentication. I've kind of got an authentication section starting here with password validation. So the backend I feel like is the most important attribute of auth, of the different kinds of stuff it will use. And so we'll do this, paste that in like that. He's got a note here about this is needed for the standard Django admin. That's why he left it here. And then they've got the Allauth authentication backend. I'm going to get rid of the comments because I don't need them for myself long term. But that's step 2. And then we'll come to the bottom and we'll create a new section called, and I'll give it the name of the package of django-allauth. And we'll drop in, oh, I forgot the site ID. We'll get to that in a second. We'll drop in all of these settings that are here. And we'll read through them in a minute just to make sure we understand what's required. This site ID stuff that's here, this is from the other Django app that was installed as a prerequisite. So it was that Django contrib sites app. I think Allauth uses that under the covers for some stuff, and so it needs a site configuration. So you have to set an ID for your specific site. There's information about the sites contrib module up on the Django documentation if you're interested to learn more. So let's create a sites section as well. And where can we put that? We can put that, stick to alphabetical. That works fairly well. So this will be the sites module. We'll say Django contrib sites with the site ID of 1. Sites are an interesting scheme that allow you to have a single Django application. It can actually target different, totally different websites. So your Django app can respond based on like the domain name coming from the request. So you could conceivably have, multiple sites being served from the same Django app. And I think it was its primary use case for a newspaper once upon a time, or maybe still today, where the newspaper served multiple domains, multiple versions of the site that had the same backing database. So let's look at these settings and see if they make sense. We're saying we want the email to be required. Okay, that makes sense. The username is not required. In fact, I explicitly don't want usernames. I kind of want the site to treat the email address as the username. I'm not going to expose that in a lot of places, and I just find that the username is going to be cumbersome. So I believe Allauth will generate a username for you based on the email address. There is a prompt for, okay, he's making it so you don't have to enter your password twice. I like that. I think I've always found it a little silly when you have to enter your password twice. Especially if you can do account resets easily, like you can create an account. If you goof it up so that you forgot your password for some reason, then you could do a reset and get that back. I honestly don't know what this session remember stuff is for, and this authentication method of being email is indicative that it's going to go through an email flow, and unique email is a good attribute to have, because if we're going to use this as the constraint for our accounts are going to be coming purely from email, then I don't want a user to try and sign up with the same email address. It's going to cause a lot of problems. So that's a good setting to have in there. So that is that setup stuff. And it looks like maybe django-allauth has some models that it works with, so we need to migrate our data. So let's do that now. We've got everything installed, and if I run manage migrate, we'll see what happens. Okay, so there's the sites module, there's the social account stuff, and there's the account stuff. Okay, That all makes sense. The next thing we need to do is expose the actual Allauth URLs, and we're going to go to our URLs module to make this update. Let's jump over there. So our URLs is relative to this file that's right here, and we've got this URL patterns. The reason this looks like really dense is because I'm using black as a code formatter, and there's not enough information here yet for black to force this to wrap lines. So it automatically formats in my editor, and so it looks condensed right now, but this will change. And I should also note, I did make some changes since the previous stream, and one of the recommendations out there is to change the name of the admin. Now, my code is publicly available, so you as a viewer and anybody looking at the repo could determine that my admin is no longer sitting on admin, but it's now at this office name. And I picked that because it's about home schools, and I figured administrators are in an office. I was just being silly. But the point of changing it is so that your website is not as accessible security-wise to anybody running a variety of scripts. So these people there are people out there that are sometimes called script kiddies, and they run a suite of automated scripts that just look at websites and try and figure out what they are. And by figuring out what they are, like a Django app running such and such version, whatever, they can try a bunch of known exploits. Django is a good solid product, but just like any other piece of software, it has bugs. It has known security vulnerabilities, and people try and take advantage of that. So if you create a Django project and you leave your stuff with the default admin, it's just one more signal to anybody visiting your site that it is a Django site. And so if you take it off of that, then it just reduces that visibility. It's not foolproof, especially if my source code is living out in the open like it is, but it does help to mitigate all the script kiddies. So we want to add this accounts of Allauth right here, and take this whole line, copy it in. We'll put it after the admin, paste it like that. And so now Black has reformatted this and said, okay, you now have enough of a line that will properly wrap the lines. So all of the Allauth stuff, the login URLs, the account creation, this is all going to go under this accounts portion of the site. It's a kind of a conventional name that I've seen used in the Django community, and I don't know, there's not much more to say about it than that. The include is a pattern that can basically read the URL configuration that is defined in the Allauth module. So if you were to go to the Allauth code and look at URLs, it would be another module like this with its own URL patterns. And it's a way to do nesting. So we have this is considered the root URL configuration, and you can link anything into it from different Django apps, and that's exactly what we're doing here. We're pulling in the URLs that belong to the admin site, and we're also pulling in the URLs that are coming from Allauth. Those are our two sources right now. And I guess there's one more down here, which is the debug toolbar that I configured in a previous stream as well. So let's take a look. I think his point here is to look at the default template. So we're going to try this out. We've already run the migrations, so let's start up the server and go to this URL, which doesn't have anything there yet, so it's going to give a 404 response initially. And we're also going to find out if OBS is going to crash as I do stuff. But we should be able to go to accounts. And it's not accounts either. It's, what is it on the link? It's login, I think. Yeah, accounts login. And with any luck, nope. What did I do? Oh, I typed profile? That's not right. You know what? He commented on this and I messed up. So there is, I basically, he warned us and I didn't listen. And now we got stuck. Let's go back. Okay. He gave us a big warning. Make sure you log out, because if you don't, it's not going to work right when you're already logged in. So what's happening? Well, maybe we can see it from the network traffic. Might be interesting to look at that. Let's bring up the dev tools from Firefox and watch what happens when I go to login. So we try to go to login, and it says, oh, what it's detecting is, hey, you're actually already logged in. So let me just redirect you to where you're supposed to go if you're already logged in. And in this case, the default path to go to is this accounts profile, but we don't have accounts profile defined. So it's then throwing up a 404. So it was trying to get to the login page, but yeah, it didn't work. So I think we can fix this by going back to the admin, and which I called office again. And from here, we'll click log out up in this upper corner. So this is the debug toolbar, which is covering everything up. We can hide that and click log out. And now we're logged out. And now if we go to accounts, login, everything should do what we expect it to do. It's not pretty, it's totally unstyled, but here we are. We're at the sign in page, and like this is the, I don't even like the fact that they've called it sign in. It's the URL is called login and they call it sign in. That's something I probably will change. So let's return to the guide here and see what he says next. I think his next thing is probably going to be about changing the templates, but maybe we can take a look. There's also a sign up page, and go to that. Sign up. And we can maybe test this out. I don't know if it'll be ready to test out or not. Well, he's suggesting we don't do that yet. So maybe we'll wait on testing the sign up until we've followed through with everything, because he does eventually direct us to where we want to go, and we'll just keep following suit. So I like his suggestion here. There are multiple strategies for dealing with templates. Templates are the pages that what gets rendered when a view gets called and it collects the data from a database. All the data, which is called context, gets passed to a template. Django has a template rendering engine, and basically the static text of the template, mostly HTML, and there will be placeholders that will get filled in, and those placeholders will get filled in with whatever the context had. I bring that up because there are different places that you can put templates. So some people will recommend putting templates within a Django application, and some people will recommend having one kind of global templates area. I happen to be in the global templates camp. I think it's more useful to have all of my templates be in a single place, so I'm not looking around for templates. But if you're making reusable components, then you might want to put, for that reusable component, it makes perfect sense to put templates in there, because that's where it would naturally go. So anyway, kudos, Will, because I like this suggestion. I think it's a good one. So let's start by, rather than sign up here, let's go ahead and make our template area. So we're going to stop the server, and I don't have a templates directory yet. So we're going to make a templates directory. And we're also going to make the place where the account template is going to go. So I think it is important in this context to call it the account template. If we go to the django-allauth section, they have documentation about what you can override, and they basically are telling you if you want to override this particular template, you have to give it this particular name. So account login as one we'd have to use. Account sign up, I imagine, is one that's down here. So this is all pretty well documented on what you can actually override. And they even give a link to the templates directory to see what's available. So account and yeah, sign up, login, all that kind of stuff. Hopefully that makes sense. Again, if you have any questions, let me know, and I'll pause on that and try and explain more. So in order to make templates work, Django has to know where the templates are, and because templates can kind of go anywhere, you have to tell the Django about this template process. So I am going to kind of follow suit here. This might have to be a little different because I think I've moved some stuff around. Maybe we'll see. We'll go over to our settings again and find the templates section. Should be in here. And right now the templates directories is empty. So, but it is saying look for the app directories. So it says appers is true. That setting might complain as soon as we set dirs, but we'll find out. So if you look at this, I'm sorry, I'm jumping around quite a bit, and that's unnecessary. Let's copy this code. This is what we really need in here, and we'll put it right there. So the important thing to note is this base directory. The base directory is defined at the top of this file, and it's the way this is calculated. It says, look where you are right now. That's what this dunder file attribute is at the end. And give me the absolute path to that. And then take the directory above it. So not the file itself, but the directory. And then take the directory above that. So at one directory, it's pointing to this project directory. One more directory is pointing to the root of the entire repository. So when we get down to the template section, by saying join, you're telling the directory, you're pointing out to Django that the directory is the base directory, which is the root of my repository, joined with templates, which is exactly where we put the template stuff. So this should be right. So coming back over here, we now have, we can make a login and a sign up, and we'll follow his for now because they're nice and simple, and they should prove what we want. So let's do it. So we need to go over here into account and create a login HTML file, and I don't know if this is meant to be a full HTML file or if it's meant to be a fragment. I'm not sure how that works, but I'm not going to sweat too much on the actual HTML structure. This was something that would absolutely change over time. So that's the login page, and then we have the sign up HTML. And we'll take this little snippet and we'll paste it in here. And so now what we did have before was this version of an ugly sign-up page, and I think the difference is the sign-up page will have even less on it. It'll get rid of this menu stuff. It'll get rid of this already have an account stuff. It's just, I think it's mostly to prove that this is how you override the template. So let's start the server again. Refresh the page. And it's going, and there it goes. So now we have a simplified sign-up page. So jumping back to the article, what do we have? Got these two new pages, and he's showing us exactly like what we just saw a moment ago, where we were getting a 404 not found. I don't know how well you can read that from Twitch, but the URL here is pointing to that account's profile URL, which is meaning that it's pointing to the wrong place. And so we need to tell our users where to go. And to do that, you put in this login redirect URL. I can't remember, honestly, if this is coming from Django itself or it's coming from Allauth. Frankly, the fact that there's a login redirect URL and an account logout redirect URL might indicate to me that it's actually both, for all I know. So we'll follow suit with the settings. I think I will probably not call it home. We'll talk on that in a second. Both reference a... trying to understand this. What did he say here? So he creates... His strategy for creating pages is pretty interesting. He creates an app specifically for pages. This would be like an authenticated version of the homepage. So he's got as we dig down to it, what I want to do is like go through, there's a bunch more code that we want to do. So before I piecemeal out little bits of code, let's see if we can try and understand what is actually happening in his process here. And then we can work through that and see if we get to it. And so he creates a new pages app, which I guess is where he's going to put a lot of his template views. An interesting strategy, and one I might consider adopting. And where does he go next? So then in his root URL configuration, he sets the very root of his app so to be point at this page's URLs. So that is like anything that's at mywebsite.com/ will go into pages. And then he defines the actual view. And then it said in the URL configuration of that app, remember this is like a hierarchy, that the thing that has no path is going to be the home page for the site. And that's why he's calling it home. I think that the name home is the Django reverse name that matches up. I don't think it has to do with the template so much as this name attribute right here. So where do I want mine to go? Maybe this is where, rather than copying to the letter, we need to think for a bit. When I structure my website, ultimately, it is going to be for a very specific purpose. If a user is logged into this homeschool app, they are going to want to do the scheduling work for homeschooling. And so I don't think I want to have a version where the root website URL, and I haven't even given it a name yet, is the app. I think I want there to be either dashboard or app as like the name of it. So you'd go to, I'll just call it homeschool.com. But like you go to homeschool.com and you'd go to the sign in page, and then once you sign in, where you get redirected to is not homeschool.com, but homeschool.com probably /app, just because it's nice and short. I think that's the pattern that I want to follow. And I want to do that for a couple of reasons, I think. Maybe just one, I don't know. The primary reason that springs to mind is that the page that you put on is like we sometimes call it a landing page, where that is the first thing that people see when they've never experienced the website before, is essentially a marketing site. You're trying to sell to people the idea that your website is going to be valuable, or that's what you're doing if you're building a SaaS, like I'm trying to. So you first have to introduce people to it, to give them an opportunity to understand your product before they're even going to consider anything. And So I want to put a marketing site on there, and marketing sites usually have like a lot of design flair and things that don't fit into the application structure. So the template that I'm going to use for a marketing page is likely very different from the template that I would use in the actual application itself. And so if I make my redirect go back to the marketing page, it's possible for me to change the marketing page so that it will, dynamically know that you are now logged in and have an entirely different layout. But I think what I would end up doing is probably fighting with the HTML that's meant for marketing flair and design elements that maybe some CSS stuff that you wouldn't want in the app-specific code. So I think there'll probably be kind of a different world in that regard, where by putting him at the app, I can have an entirely different layout. There is a secondary benefit to this, and that benefit is that if you're authenticated and you land on an app page or a dashboard, something like that, rather than the root URL, then you can continue to go back to the marketing page. So if you ever wanted to go check out features, or maybe links to documentation is put on the homepage, whatever it is that you need on your homepage, you can leave it there and not have to worry about this mixed mode of dealing with apps. So I think that's the strategy that I want to take, is to point to a slightly different place. So that makes me wonder if I actually want, to point to a Pages app right now. I like the idea of having a Pages app, especially for all the template kind of stuff. So your standard about page, your standard contact page, your terms and conditions page, these are kind of things that are required, not, well, the terms and conditions is required from a legal level, and then generally just people want to know what you're about, surprisingly. And a contact page is a nice way to get in touch with support. So these are three common things that show up on virtually every website in some form or another. So that makes sense for doing that later for Pages stuff. So it's really a question of, where do I want my dashboard to live? And I am not sure, honestly. Let me think on this for a second. So one path that I can take is that I don't have to make a decision about which app it belongs to explicitly. And I think that might be the path I want to go down for now. To say that my app is, or my main application view, sorry, I get a little, terminology is getting a little confusing, I apologize. My main application view can live within a Django app, but without including all the URLs for that. So that seems like a reasonable strategy for now. And it's not like an undoable strategy. I can put something as a placeholder here with a known name that I like. And if I want to change where the view lives later, that is a really minor detail in the scheme of things. So let's do that. To start, how am I going to do that? We're going to go back to the settings that he showed, because we still need to set those settings of where do you land when you log out and where do you land on a redirect. I think for me, they're going to have different answers. For me, the log out, I want to shoot people back to the index. The index is like the root of the entire domain. And when they log in, I want to dump them in the app. That's the difference. So there's going to be different values here. So I'm going to take both of these, and just not going to work for the second one for now. That's okay. And also, let's look up maybe the Django, the login redirect URL. I think, oops, was the wrong thing. I didn't mean to type that one. Let's try that again. Django, login, redirect URL is a Django setting and not a Allauth setting. And here is the perfect instance of why you can see it was going to accounts profile, because that's the default. They've also got log out redirect URL, but I think that django-allauth is taking over this setting, which is why we're setting something different. So where to put this? Well, we have our authentication stuff here. So I think I want to put the Django setting up here. And that's the login redirect URL. Now, curiously, this is very curious to me. This is a URL, and it's a hard-coded URL. But over here, he's got a string of home that seems more like the name of a view. I don't know what's happening there. I don't know if Allauth is taking over the definition of this URL. I would hope so, because I've always thought it was a little weird that you have to use an absolute URL rather than something calculated by Django. That's something else. So let's say the login redirect URL, I'm going to call it app, like I've said. And for the moment, I want to say that the log out redirect URL is going to go to we can say app for now, and that it will do some weirdness, but it should work. So if I make it so that in order to get to the app page, you have to be authenticated, then what's going to happen is if you log out and the redirect URL says go to app, and there is the decorator protecting you can only come to this page when you're authenticated, what it's going to do is then kick you back, I believe, to the login page. So we can check that out in a minute. And that's probably about where we're going to end for the evening, I would think, here in the next 10 to 15 minutes or so. So he's creating a home page. Not going to do that. We're just going to go back to our settings or our URLs file, excuse me. And I'm going to say from homeschool.schools, where I'm going to put my dashboard, my app view for now, .views, import app. And then we can put app at path app. And confusingly, I'm going to give it the name of app as well. So I think that the name is what those parameters are going to be looking for. So that all works, or it looks like it works, except if you try and run this, that view should not exist. So this will not succeed. So wasn't able to import that app, which is totally what I expected. So we'll come through and fix that up. And this is where we'll probably get into a little bit of testing, maybe just to kind of prove that it's there. So let's jump over to the schools app where I've got this stuff, and we're going to go to the schools views file. Right now it's totally empty. And purely to make it pass, or make it work at all, let's go import HTTP response from Django HTTP. And we need to create the view itself. And a view, the most basic version of a view, is a function that takes a request object and returns a response object. So for the moment, just to test things out, we're going to say HTTP response of hello from app. This is all just kind of placeholder stuff. And if I was doing this in a more test-driven development way, we'd actually write a test for this before we do any of this stuff, but we'll get to that in a second. I kind of want to just prove the point that the Allauth connectivity is going to work as we need it to. So now we go back to our site, and there's still nothing here because we haven't made a homepage yet, but now you see that there's this app view that's got the name of app. Let's go to the accounts sign up page, and we'll create a new account, test@testing.com, and it's warning us that this is insecure, but that's okay. I don't need anything secure here. What did I just type as my password? If that works. Okay, cool. And so what happened? We signed up, we created a new account, and we've got hello from app. Super. That's what we need. And you can see here that we also get, this is where the decision to use the console backend for the email stuff is Will's way of saying, like, email is basically not set up. So it's logging this out, and if we had a proper email setup, that this is the email that they would receive on their stuff, and we can probably configure those templates and do all sorts of other stuff. But that's proving that system would work, and it would help to verify their account, in fact. Okay, so we've got our app, and we've proven that we can do the sign up, which frankly achieves the goal that I set out for the evening. But we'll continue through and see what else he's got on here. Maybe he's got a little bit more. So he configures a home page, he sets it up. This is where he sets the home name that's from that view. And okay, he put in a template that gives the ability to log out. I think that's smart for our purposes. So we can do that. We'll create yeah, we can use a template view. We'll change our view around. Do I want to do that? No, we'll probably call render. Let's change some stuff. Again, we're kind of ad-libbing, but that's okay. So we'll go to the templates area, and we need a new directory for the schools app that I created. So I'm at the account level, and we need one for schools. And I'm going to come in here and call it, give a file name of app.html, and then I'm going to paste in the stuff that he put in there. Okay, and what we should be able to see after we fix this up is the response that he's got in his example down here of this really basic who you are, and then the ability to log in and log out, which is useful. So we need to come over to this area now, and now we want to replace, excuse me, we want to replace the HTTP response with a call to render. And I believe that's in the shortcuts area. I never remember where render is. Yep. Okay. So we're going to change this import to be shortcuts and render. And render is a bit more of a lower level experience. Render's job is to take a template and take a context dictionary, like I mentioned earlier, and do the rendering, the compiling those two things together into a bunch of data, a string, and then wrapping that up into an HTTP response and returning that. So what we need to do is change this to be a call to render, and we need to give it the path to the template, which is schools app HTML. And our context is going to be, let's give it a good name. We'll just call it context and give it an empty dictionary, and then change this to context. I feel like I might also be missing the request. I think it takes that too. Yeah. Okay. So I lied a little bit. The actual first argument to render is really the request that it received. And it uses that because some of the stuff that gets made available to the template is data from the request, like the user. Otherwise, if you think about this template that we have over here, it's saying if the user is authenticated, well, where does that user come from? Is that true? That might actually be coming from somewhere else. I don't want to mislead you. So, tangent. Is it coming from somewhere else? Do we have context? Yeah. It's coming from one of these context processors, and I don't remember which one. I want to say it's the auth one, but I think the auth one depends on this request one. So don't fret about it too much, but there's definitely some stuff happening that enables this user to be something accessible in the template, even if we didn't provide it directly, since all we're doing is providing an empty dictionary. So now if we save this, we can refresh our page, and when it comes up, I don't know what, there we go. We've got our hi test at testing. That's the name of our stuff. If we log out, I think I've said the log out will come to the app view, but I haven't protected it yet. So it's going to come to basically that other template that he showed, where it has the sign in, blah, blah, blah. Oh, interesting. I don't know what this stuff is. So there's the messages of here. Maybe it doesn't want us to sign out until we've confirmed our email. That's an interesting aspect. I didn't expect that. So there's something else going on there, which is why we're not seeing that extra bit of template that he has. Okay. So that brings us to the end of creating a login and logout process for this. Let's write a unit test to prove that the wiring of this stuff is correct. That will give us the benefit of the fact that some automation is testing that stuff is correct, and it gives me a chance to show off a bit of stuff. And frankly, I'm going to have to get some reminders in here because I'm not going to remember all these details. At work we use PyTest and PyTest Django, which changes some of the ways of doing things, and I'm using the standard Django test runner. So what I need to show is a little different. So let's figure this stuff out. In order to start, we need to go and actually get into the schools app and open the tests area. And I want to create a new file, testviews.py. And we need to import from Django test, import the test case class. And to make a test case class, you subclass from it. And this is going to be any test that's related to this specific app view. So I'm going to call this test app and let it subclass that test case. And the first thing we want to do is check an OK, that we get some kind of OK response. So I'm going to use the Django client to do that. So let's do, I'll call it test OK. And what do we want to say? The app returns 200 OK for a user. So we need a Django client. So what is the Django client? It's a useful utility that is a testing utility that lets you make calls to your Django site. And it runs through a lot of the very same machinery that your live Django app is going to do. So using the client is useful. It's kind of like a high-level tool. It's like an end-to-end sort of flow. So if you're going to test some like really detailed business logic, you probably don't want to use the client. But for testing a view, it works really well. So this is showing us where we get the client coming from the same test package. So we will import client, and then we will say client is client. And then the next bit that we're going to need is reverse, because we want to make the request to the right part of the site, but we want to use the name of the view that I've kind of globally identified. In this case, it's the app name. You can provide, so we could definitely do something like this, where we could say response is equal to client, and then say get, and then hard code app, like that. And frankly, I think this should work. So if we say assert equal response status code and 200, this test should run. Yep, and pass. So it did what we want. Like that's a right answer. But this part is the part that we want to change, because if I ever changed this thing, so instead of, maybe I got some feedback perhaps from my wife saying like, app is a dumb name, you should call it dashboard. Well, now I'd have to go change the name of all of my URLs for everywhere that I've used it. So if we import reverse instead, and I need to remember where reverse is, then we can refer to the app name that was attached in the URLs file and not have to worry about any pathing changes. So Django reverse. Okay, it's in URLs. They've moved some of this stuff around with Django 3.0. It used to be in URL resolvers or something like that, and so I operate in a world where I'm using older versions of Django in some projects, and then this is Django 3 here, so I get the latest and greatest stuff here. But it does mean that my knowledge of where imports are can waver. So here's the reverse function, and we'll change this to be reverse, and we're going to reverse the app. So that should still work, because what reverse is returning is that string of app, like this. We just don't want to include that. So this is the first passing test. But it's not ultimately what we want. So I think the last thing I want to do is add enough decoration to this so that only authenticated users can access this page. And that looks like login required is the decorator that we're looking for. So let's do a search for login required. I know the name of it, but I don't know where it lives in Django. I'm sure I could learn better tools for discovering this stuff, but I just don't remember. So let's add the login required decorator and see what it does to our test. I believe it's going to cause the test to break. So we're going to say from Django contrib dot auth dot decorators import login required. If I can type it correctly. And then we're going to add the login required decorator to our view. So in this flow with this client, we haven't specified any information about who is the user that's associated with the client. So because of that, it's using an anonymous user in the auth system. So what we should get back, I predict, will be a 302, which is a redirect. And if we can look at the details, it's going to be a redirect to the login URL. So it's 302, and I always forget how to check the actual redirect location. So let's go back to my other app, because I know I have it in there. So the other app, the old app that I used was Conductor, and we're going to look for some 302s in here, and I've got them in this file, and I'm sure that I probably am checking where the redirect goes to. So 302. Okay. Okay. So you just call this this get location is what we want. I'm going to steal that code, or just reuse it. Not stealing. My own code. I wrote it. All right, this still may fail. It's well, we'll see. Oh, of course it's gonna fail because I didn't actually change the 200. We're gonna change this to a 302, but it's not going to the login page. That's not correct. So was there a comment in his post about Allauth might have a different name for login and logout? There it is, account login. So let's change this to account login, which is the Allauth version of the login page. And it passes. Cool. Out of curiosity, let's see. Self, assert, false, true. I'm just going to print out. This is a kind of a crude hack that I use sometimes to check on stuff, is do a little print and then put in the assertion that I know will fail, because that's when the printouts appear on the runner. Okay, so it's pointing to accounts login. Great. I was just curious. I didn't actually know where it was going. So this is no longer the right test name or test at all. So let's call this the test unauthenticated access. And the docstring will be unauthenticated users are redirected to the login page. That's really what's happening. I like my test to have docstrings that are not saying test that this is doing that. I want it to be like basically an imperative as much as I can of what is the requirement, what is the definition of what we want to do. So that's exactly what this statement is saying. It is the expectation that users are redirected to the login page. So now we need to come back and we need to do authentication here. We basically want the same test that we had before of this, but we want this to pass with a 200. How do we get that? We have to change the client or add some calls to the client to do the actual authentication. So let's go over to the testing area, which I think I, of course, walked away from. So let's see. No, not there. There's reverse. There's a client. Okay. So we need to do authentication. And how are we going to do that? We are going to do something. Hold on a second. So there is this path of you can call login on the client. And that is a way to go through the credential system and basically do this properly of creating and having a created account and then going through that. I don't want to do that. There's this simpler option where if you say force login and you give it a user, it'll basically just fake it. And since we're in a testing context, I don't honestly care if it's going through the real login versus the forced login. It doesn't, from my point of view, it doesn't matter. Some people might disagree with me there, and they are welcome to, but I think it doesn't matter. What I do need, though, is a user to work with. So I didn't walk through this. I did this offline, but I introduced a package called Factory Boy, which is a factory tool which makes records for you. So I can import that. So I can say from homeschool users tests factories import user factory. Okay. And then here we can do user is you call the user factory, and what that will do is do a creation of a user record. Let's take a quick 30-second detour to look at what that looks like. It's really not a lot of code at the start. There's a lot of ways you can customize this. So if you wanted to pick specific usernames, whatever, you can do that. But I am trying to be minimal about this. So all it's doing is saying, I want a factory that points at the user model and creates members, creates users out of that. So then we'd say client force, what was it, force login? Yep, force login, and provide it the user. So hopefully, with any luck, this is now providing it 200. Good. Okay, so I think that's probably good enough place to stop coding, and then we'll chat about next steps. There is a package that I saw that might be interesting for improving testing so that we have less of this kind of stuff. It's Django Test Plus, I think, that adds some little niceties to the test class. So yeah, you basically, instead of pulling from Django's test class, you pull from Test Plus version of it, and it gives you new powers, basically. Like Test Plus has reverse already built into it, so I had to do that reverse at the top, and they said, oh, that's silly, we'll just give it to you all the time. And what else does it have? It has the ability to, looks like it has the ability to call a client directly with the URL. Oh, that's might be even better. Like you don't even have to do a reverse. You just give it the name of the URL that you want to get. That's pretty cool. So there's some cool stuff in here that might be worth doing. I don't know how they do auth in here though. I'm not seeing that. They do it without a factory. They call this make user. although you can pass it a user factory if you wanted to. So I may start to create a custom test class for my app that uses Test Plus, derives from it, does some wiring of my own user factory to make sure I'm getting the users that I want, and all of that. So there's some interesting stuff in here that might be helpful. So that's one thing that we can consider. In fact, let me write that down. And I'm going to say that this is done. I haven't committed it yet, but it's done. Hooray. So we'll say add Django Test Plus. One thing we can do. And so the next time I stream, I will probably, we've got enough to get going. We've got the ability to create accounts, and it might be time, it's probably time to get into the actual problem at hand and work on some of the initial models that we're going to need. And that's going to include stuff like schools and students and courses and school years and a bunch of different stuff. So that will be getting into the guts of making actual views, doing some modeling, and we can stop fiddling with installing so many packages. I'm trying to move away. It's kind of, these are informative of how to get a package integrated, and it's useful for a little while. But you could integrate a bunch of packages and then not actually know how to do the work of your project. And so I want to be able to teach on that subject too. So with that, I think I am going to sign off for the night. If you want to keep up with me, I am up on Twitter. You're welcome to follow me there. Please check out my website and sign up for the mailing list. I do post a bunch of stuff. I've got an entire blog series going on right now all about learning Django. So a lot of these concepts that you'll see here will be listed out in text if that's more your speed. But I do appreciate you following along, and I will see you next time. Take care.